5 years ago, a broken woman walked into a diner with her last $3. The owner handed her breakfast and said words that made no sense. "Pay me when you're the boss." She thought he was mocking her. Today, she just pulled up in a limousine worth more than that entire building. But this isn't about the money. It's about what happened in those 5 brutal years between hunger and power, between shame and strength, between wanting to disappear and refusing to stay invisible. If you've ever been so broke you couldn't see tomorrow, stay with me. Drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Hit that like button and let me tell you about the Tuesday morning that changed everything. The cold hit different when you were hungry. Lena Hart learned that the hard way, standing outside the Bluebird Diner at 6:43 on a Tuesday morning that felt like the ass end of winter refusing to let go. The wind came off the interstate in mean little gusts, cutting through the cheap jacket she'd bought at a Goodwill 2 months back when she still had enough pride to care what she looked like. That pride was gone now. What she had left was stubbornness, the kind that kept her legs moving even when her brain was screaming at her to just sit down and quit. She'd been walking since 4 a.m., not because she had anywhere to be. That was the joke, wasn't it? No job to get to, no apartment to pay rent on, no meetings that mattered. She walked because the shelter kicked everyone out at dawn, and sitting still made the cold worse. Movement kept the blood going. Movement kept the thoughts at bay. Movement kept her from having to admit that this was her life now. The diner sat off Route 9 like something out of a postcard nobody wanted to send. Faded blue paint, gravel parking lot full of potholes, a neon sign that said open 24 hours, even though the second R had been burned out for years. Lena had passed it before, back when she still had a car, back when she was someone different. She'd never stopped. Why would she? It looked like the kind of place truckers went to get heartburn and bad coffee. But this morning, the smell of bacon hit her from 30 feet away, and her stomach twisted so hard she had to stop walking. When was the last time she'd eaten? Yesterday? The day before? Time got slippery when you were this tired. She'd had half a protein bar she found in her backpack, the kind that tasted like cardboard mixed with optimism. Before that, someone at the shelter had given her an apple that was more bruised than fruit. Before that, nothing she could remember clearly. She had $3.62 in her pocket. She'd counted it 4 times that morning, like the numbers might change if she was persistent enough. The smart move was to save it, stretch it, make it last another day, maybe 2 if she was careful. The smart move was to keep walking, find somewhere warm to sit until the library opened, drink water from the bathroom sink and pretend she wasn't falling apart. But the smell of that bacon wouldn't let her go. Lena pushed open the door. The warmth hit her first, then the noise. The clatter of dishes, the hiss of the griddle, someone laughing too loud in the back. The place wasn't crowded, just a handful of people scattered across the counter and booths. Working people, mostly. The kind who had somewhere to be after this. Jobs that started early, lives that made sense. She felt them look at her. Not staring exactly. Just that quick flick of the eyes people do when they're sizing you up, deciding if you're a problem. She knew what they saw. Greasy hair pulled back in a ponytail that hadn't been washed in 4 days. Jeans with a stain on the knee she couldn't remember getting. The jacket that was too thin. The shoes that were coming apart at the seams. The face of someone who'd stopped sleeping right. She slid onto the last stool at the far end of the counter, the one closest to the exit. Old habit. Always know where the door is. The waitress came over, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes and a name tag that said Donna. She didn't smile, but she wasn't mean about it either, just handed Lena a laminated menu spotted with old coffee stains. "What can I get you, hun?" Lena stared at the menu like it was written in another language. Prices swam in front of her eyes. Pancakes, $4.50. Eggs and toast, $5.25. The breakfast special, $7.99. She had $3.62. "Just coffee," she said. Her voice came out rougher than she expected. "Black." Donna's eyes did that thing again, that quick assessment, but she just nodded and walked away. The coffee came in a thick white mug, too hot to drink right away. Lena wrapped both hands around it, feeling the heat seep into her fingers. She'd make it last, sip it slow, stay as long as she could without anyone telling her to leave. That's when she noticed the man. He was sitting 3 stools down, wearing a charcoal sweater that probably cost more than her entire outfit, reading something on his phone. Mid-30s, maybe. Dark hair starting to gray at the temples. The kind of face that looked like it smiled easy, even though he wasn't smiling now. There was something about the way he sat, relaxed but paying attention, like he was exactly where he wanted to be, even though this place was a dump. He looked up, caught her staring, and she looked away fast. Stupid! Don't make eye contact. Don't draw attention. Just drink your coffee and disappear. But then Donna came back, and she wasn't alone. She was carrying a plate. Here you go, she said, setting it down in front of Lena. Lena stared at it. 2 eggs, over easy, 3 strips of bacon, hash browns, toast with butter already melting into it. I didn't, she started. I know, Donna said. Her voice was kind but firm, the kind of kindness that didn't want to be argued with. Don't worry about it. I can't. You look hungry. Eat. Lena's throat closed up. She wanted to push the plate away, wanted to stand up and walk out, wanted to do anything except accept charity from strangers. But the smell of that bacon was killing her, and the eggs looked perfect, and she was so goddamn tired of being proud when pride didn't pay for anything. I can pay, she said, even though it was a lie. Even though $3 wouldn't cover half of this. Donna just patted her shoulder and walked away. Lena sat there for a long moment, staring at the food. Her hands were shaking. She told herself it was just the cold, just the exhaustion, not the fact that she wanted to cry and couldn't remember the last time she'd let herself. She picked up the fork. The first bite of eggs nearly broke her. They were hot and buttery and perfect, and she had to close her eyes because the relief was too much. She hadn't realized how far gone she was until something good hit her system. The bacon was crispy. The hash browns were salted just right. The toast was soft in the middle and crunchy on the edges. She ate slowly at first, trying to maintain some dignity. But hunger won out, and before she knew it, she was halfway through the plate, eating like someone might take it away. Good? She froze. The man from down the counter was looking at her now, and there was something in his eyes she couldn't quite read. Not pity, not judgment, something else. Yeah, she said quietly. Thanks. Don't thank me yet, he said. You haven't tried the coffee. Despite everything, she almost smiled. Almost. They sat in silence for a moment. Lena kept eating, slower now, trying not to look as desperate as she felt. The man went back to his phone. Donna refilled his coffee without being asked. When Lena's plate was empty, every bite gone, even the crumbs of toast, she felt almost human again. Full belly, warm room, a few minutes where she didn't have to think about what came next. Then the reality hit her. She pulled out her cash, 3 wrinkled dollar bills and 62 cents in change, and set it on the counter. It looked pathetic sitting there, not enough to cover what she'd eaten, not enough to matter. Donna came back over, saw the money, and her expression shifted into something softer. Honey, it's all I have, Lena said. The words hurt coming out. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I thought I could just get coffee, but then... Keep it, the man said. Lena turned to look at him. He was standing now, pulling on a coat that probably cost more than a month's rent. He nodded toward her money. Keep it. Breakfast is covered. I can't. You already ate it, he pointed out. Little late to give it back now. I don't take handouts, Lena said, and even as the words left her mouth, she knew how stupid they sounded. She'd just eaten a free breakfast. She was living in a shelter. Her entire life right now was handouts. The man studied her for a moment, and she had the uncomfortable feeling he could see right through her. See the shame, the anger, the fear she was trying so hard to bury. It's not a handout, he said finally. It's an investment. In what? In you. He picked up his coffee, drained the last of it. Pay me back when you're the boss. Lena stared at him. What? You heard me. He set down a 20 on the counter, nodded to Donna. When you're the boss, when you've got your own thing going, when you're running the show, then you can pay me back. That's... She didn't know how to finish the sentence. Ridiculous? Impossible? Cruel? That's the deal, he said simply. He was already walking toward the door. No rush. I'm patient. I don't even know your name, Lena called after him. He paused at the door, looked back. Adrian. Adrian Cole. Why are you doing this? Adrian smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile that reached his eyes. It was the smile of someone who knew something she didn't. Because someone did it for me once. And because you look like you're about to do something stupid if someone doesn't remind you that you're worth more than you think you are. Then he was gone, the door swinging shut behind him, leaving Lena sitting at the counter with $3 in front of her and a stranger's words ringing in her ears. Pay me when you're the boss. Like it was that simple. Like she could just decide to be someone different, someone successful, someone who mattered. Like he could see a future she couldn't. Donna came back over, swept up the money. Don't worry about it, sweetheart. Adrian owns this place. Has for years. Never told anyone, but we all figured it out eventually. He owns it? Owns about half the commercial real estate in this county, from what I hear. But he still comes in here every Tuesday, sits at the same stool, drinks bad coffee like it's the best thing he's ever tasted. Donna shook her head. Rich people are weird. Lena looked down at her $3, then at the door Adrian had walked through. A billionaire had just bought her breakfast. Told her to pay him back when she was successful. Like it was inevitable. Like there was no question she'd get there eventually. It was the most absurd thing anyone had ever said to her. It was also the kindest. Lena stood up, tucked her money back in her pocket. She walked to the door, pushed it open, stepped back out into the cold. The wind hit her again, but it didn't feel quite as mean now. Her stomach was full. Her hands had stopped shaking. Pay me when you're the boss. The words followed her as she walked. Down Route 9, past the gas station with the broken pumps, past the abandoned strip mall where she'd slept in her car 3 months ago before it got repossessed, past all the landmarks of her failure. She didn't know why Adrian had said it, didn't know if he meant it, or if it was just something rich people said to make themselves feel better about their guilt. Didn't know if he'd even remember her face tomorrow. But something in his voice had sounded certain, like he could see something she couldn't, like her future was already written, and all she had to do was show up for it. Lena didn't go back to the shelter that night, or the next. She'd used up her 3-day limit anyway, and the waiting list to get back in was 2 weeks long. Instead, she spent the first night in the library bathroom, locked in a stall, sitting on her backpack to keep it off the floor. The second night, she found an unlocked laundromat and slept in the back between the dryers, curled up on a pile of unclaimed lost and found clothes. She kept thinking about the diner, about Adrian, about those stupid, impossible words. When you're the boss? Not if. When. On the third day, she did something she'd been avoiding for 6 months. She went to the public library, logged into one of their ancient computers, and opened her email. 347 unread messages stared back at her. Most of them from before the business fell apart, before the debts buried her, before everyone who'd promised to support her disappeared like smoke. She scrolled past them all, opened a new message, and started typing. Dear Mr. Patterson, I know I still owe you $8,400 from the loan you gave me last year. I know I promised to have it paid back by June, and it's now February. I know you have every reason to never trust me again, but I have an idea, a real one this time, better than before, and I need to know if you'd be willing to meet with me. Just 20 minutes. I'll come to you. I'll bring coffee. I'll show you everything I've worked out. I'm not the same person I was 6 months ago. I'm meaner now, hungrier. I know what mistakes not to make. 20 minutes. That's all I'm asking. Her finger hovered over the send button for a full minute. This was Patterson, the guy who'd screamed at her over the phone when her first business tanked. The guy who'd told her she was naive and foolish and would never make it in the real world. The guy who'd written off his investment and written her off in the same breath. She hit send. Then she wrote another email. And another. And another. Everyone who'd ever believed in her before she failed. Everyone who'd walked away. Everyone who'd looked at her with pity or disappointment or barely concealed satisfaction that she'd crashed and burned. She wrote to all of them. By the time the library closed at 8, she'd sent 43 emails. Her hands ached. Her eyes burned from staring at the screen, but she felt something she hadn't felt in months. Not hope. Exactly. Hope was too soft, too fragile. This was sharper, meaner. This was the feeling of having nothing left to lose. Patterson didn't write back. Neither did most of the others. 3 people responded with polite variations of no thanks. One person told her to lose their email address. Another sent a single word, unsubscribe. But on the 7th day, someone said yes. Marcus Webb. He'd been one of her first investors in the original business, a marketing consultant who'd put in $5,000 and lost it all when everything collapsed. She'd expected him to hate her, expected him to ignore her email like all the rest. Instead, he wrote, "Coffee shop on 5th and Morrison, Thursday at 3. You get 15 minutes, not 20. And you're buying the coffee, even if you have to steal it." Lena read the email 3 times, then 4, then 5, waiting for it to disappear or reveal itself as a joke. It didn't. She had 2 days to prepare, 2 days to turn the scattered thoughts in her head into something that sounded like a real plan, 2 days to figure out how to look like someone worth investing in when she'd been sleeping in laundromats. She spent every free minute at the library using their computers, their printer, their Wi-Fi. She built a new pitch deck from scratch, researched market trends, ran numbers until they stopped looking like numbers and started looking like possibilities. On Thursday, she showed up at the coffee shop 45 minutes early. She'd washed her hair in the sink at the gas station across the street, changed into the one clean shirt she had left, and tried to cover the dark circles under her eyes with makeup samples stolen from the drugstore. She bought Marcus's coffee with the last of her $3. Large dark roast, no room for cream. She remembered. Some things stuck with you. When he walked in at 3:02, she barely recognized him. He'd put on weight, grayed a little, looked older than his 40-something years, but his eyes were the same, sharp, skeptical, always calculating. He sat down without shaking her hand. "You look terrible," he said. "Yeah," Lena said. "I know." "You homeless? No point lying." "Yes." "How long?" 4 months, give or take. Marcus picked up his coffee, took a sip, studied her over the rim. "Most people in your position, they'd have left that part out, dressed it up, tried to hide it." "I'm done hiding things," Lena said. "Hiding things is what got me here." "So's bad judgment and worse execution." "That too." He almost smiled. "Almost. You said you had 15 minutes. You're down to 12. Impress me." Lena pulled out her laptop, 6 years old, held together with duct tape and spite, and turned it toward him. "I want to build a platform that connects small businesses with micro investors, not venture capital, not big banks, regular people who want to invest $100, $500 in businesses they believe in." "Crowdfunding," Marcus said flatly. "That already exists. Not like this. Current platforms take huge cuts, offer no real vetting, no follow-through. 90% of projects fail because people don't know what they're doing, and investors have no protection. I want to build something with real oversight, business mentorship built in, skin in the game from both sides." "You failed at your last business." "Yes." "Lost everyone's money." "Yes." "And now you want people to trust you with their money again." "No," Lena said. "I want to build a system where trust isn't the issue, where people invest in businesses, not in me, where there's accountability and transparency and real support. I don't want anyone to have to trust me ever again." Marcus leaned back in his chair, fingers drumming on the table. "That's a terrible pitch. You sound angry." "I am angry." "At who?" "Everyone. Myself most of all." "That's honest, at least." He took another sip of coffee. "How much do you need?" $50,000 to start. Build the platform, hire a lawyer to handle the regulatory stuff, run a pilot with 5 test businesses. 50,000. He laughed, but it wasn't a kind laugh. "Lena, you still owe me $5,000 from last time. What makes you think I'd give you 10 times that?" "Because this time I know what I'm doing," she said. "Because I've spent 4 months with nothing but time to think about where I went wrong. Because I'm not naive anymore. Because some guy told you to pay him back when you're the boss?" Lena froze. "What?" Marcus pulled out his phone, showed her the screen. It was a text message from a number she didn't recognize. "Marcus, if Lena Hart reaches out to you, hear her out. She's worth the risk." AC. "Adrian Cole sent you that?" Lena said. 2 days ago, right after you emailed me." Marcus put the phone away. "I've known Adrian for 15 years. He doesn't make recommendations lightly. So either you did something to really impress him, or he's lost his mind." Lena's hands were shaking again, but this time it wasn't from hunger or cold. "I didn't do anything. I just ate breakfast." "That's it?" "That's it." Marcus stared at her for a long moment. Then he started laughing, real laughter this time. "You ate breakfast and Adrian Cole decided you were worth investing in. That's the wildest thing I've heard all year." I don't understand, Lena said. You don't have to. Adrian sees things other people don't, always has. Marcus drained the rest of his coffee. Here's the deal. I'll give you 20,000, not 50. 20. You build a proof of concept, show me it works with real businesses and real money. If it does, we talk about the rest. 20,000, Lena repeated. It sounded like a million. It sounded like oxygen. But I want equity, 15%. 10. 12. Deal. They shook hands. Marcus's grip was firm, businesslike. When he let go, Lena felt like she might float away. Don't make me regret this, Marcus said. I won't. Yeah, you will. Everyone does eventually. Just make sure the regret is worth it. He stood up to leave, then paused. Lena, get a goddamn apartment. You can't build a company while sleeping in laundromats. I'll advance you $3,000 for housing and living expenses. Consider it a loan against your future earnings. Thank you, she said, and the words felt too small for what was happening. Don't thank me. Thank Adrian. He's the one who vouched for you. Marcus shook his head. Though for the life of me, I still don't know why. When he left, Lena sat alone at the table, staring at her laptop screen. The pitch deck she'd built. The numbers she'd run. The plan that had lived in her head for 4 months finally taking shape in the real world. $20,000. A second chance. A stranger's certainty in her worth. She closed the laptop and walked outside. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The cold was still there, winter refusing to let go, but it didn't bite quite as hard anymore. Lena pulled out her phone, a cracked piece of garbage she'd bought at a pawn shop, and pulled up the note where she'd written Adrian's words that first morning. Pay me when you're the boss. She read them again and again and again. Then she opened a new note and started writing. Things I will never do again. 1. Pretend I know what I'm doing when I don't, too. Make promises I can't keep. 3. Ignore warning signs because I want something to work for. Let failure make me small. She stared at the list for a moment, then added one more line. 5. Forget that someone believed in me when no one else did. The city moved around her, cars passed, people rushed by, buried in their phones, their lives, their problems. Nobody looked at her. Nobody knew that everything had just changed, but she knew. And for the first time in months, maybe years, Lena Hart smiled. Not because she was happy, not because things were easy, but because she was hungry again. And this time, she knew exactly what she was hungry for. The apartment Marcus's advance money bought her wasn't much. A studio on the 4th floor of a building that smelled like old curry and broken dreams. The elevator hadn't worked in 3 years. The radiator clanked like it was trying to communicate in Morse code. The previous tenant had left a stain on the ceiling that looked suspiciously like blood, and the landlord had just shrugged when Lena pointed it out. You want it or not? He'd asked. Got 6 other people lined up. She'd signed the lease that afternoon. It was the most beautiful place she'd ever seen. That first night, Lena slept on the floor because she didn't have a bed yet. She used her jacket as a pillow and her backpack as a blanket, and when she woke up at 3 in the morning with her neck screaming and her back stiff, she just lay there staring at the water-stained ceiling and grinning like an idiot. She had a door that locked. She had 4 walls. She had an address. She had $20,000 and a man who believed she could turn it into something that mattered. The grinning stopped around day 3 when reality started sending invoices. Building a platform wasn't like building a website. It was lawyers and compliance officers and regulatory frameworks she didn't understand. It was server costs and security protocols and 1,000 small decisions that could tank the whole thing if she got them wrong. It was realizing that $20,000 disappeared faster than water through a sieve when you were trying to do things the right way. Marcus had given her 3 months to show proof of concept, 90 days to build something real enough to convince him the rest of his money wouldn't vanish into the void. She had a laptop held together with duct tape, no team, and a resume that screamed failure in 40-point font. The first developer she reached out to laughed at her budget. The second one stopped returning her emails after she sent him the project scope. The third one was interested until he Googled her name and found the articles about her last business collapsing. Look, he'd said over a phone call that made her want to throw her laptop out the window. I'm sure you're nice and all, but I'm not attaching my name to someone with your track record. It's nothing personal. Everything was personal when you were rebuilding from rubble. Lena spent 2 weeks interviewing developers who either wanted too much money or too much equity, or looked at her like she was selling snake oil. She was running out of time and options when she found Dev. His real name was Devendra Prasad, and he worked the night shift at a 24-hour tech support call center, the kind of place where dreams went to die slowly under fluorescent lights. He answered her job posting at 2 in the morning with an email that was half code samples and half brutal honesty. I built 3 platforms that failed. None of them were my fault, but that doesn't matter because they still failed. I'm 26, I'm tired, and I'm sick of helping people reset their passwords. Your budget is insulting and your timeline is impossible, but at least you're trying to build something that might not be evil. When can we meet? They met at a coffee shop that was too loud and too bright. Dev showed up in a hoodie that said, "I void warranties," and carrying a laptop that made hers look new. He was skinny, in the way of people who forgot to eat, with dark circles under his eyes that matched hers. "You really homeless 4 months?" he asked, skipping past small talk entirely. "Yes." "And some billionaire just bought you breakfast and told you to get your shit together?" "More or less." Dev nodded slowly. "That's either the weirdest thing I've ever heard or the beginning of a really specific cult. I can't tell which." "Me neither," Lena admitted. "You know this platform idea has been tried before, right? About 8 different ways. Most of them crashed and burned because of regulatory issues, or because the businesses were garbage, or because people are fundamentally bad at risk assessment." "I know. So why do you think you can do it better?" Lena had prepared for this question. She had answers about market gaps and improved vetting processes and built-in mentorship. She had data and projections and carefully crafted arguments. Instead, she said, "Because I failed already. I know what it looks like from the bottom. I know what people need when they're desperate and what they do when no one's watching. I know where the cracks are because I fell through all of them." Dev stared at her for a long moment. Then he opened his laptop. "Okay," he said. "Show me what you've got." They worked for 4 hours straight in that coffee shop until the barista started giving them dirty looks for taking up a table that long. Lena showed Dev her sketches, her framework, her ideas about how to vet businesses and protect investors. Dev poked holes in everything, questioned every assumption, made her defend choices she hadn't even realized she'd made. By the time they left, Lena's head was pounding and her pride was in shreds. Dev handed her a piece of paper with a number written on it. "That's what I need to quit my job and work on this full-time for 3 months. It's half what I'm worth and twice what you can afford." The number was $12,000. Lena did the math in her head. $12,000 for Dev. $3,000 she'd already spent on rent and basic living expenses. That left $5,000 for everything else. Legal fees, server costs, marketing, testing, and the 1,000 small emergencies that would inevitably crop up. It was impossible. "Deal," she said. Dev blinked. "You didn't even negotiate. You said it's half what you're worth. That means you're already negotiating against yourself. If I talk you down further, you'll resent it, and resentment kills startups faster than bad code. You're either really smart or really stupid. Probably both," Lena said. "Can you start Monday?" "I can start tomorrow," Dev said. "I hate that job anyway." They shook hands. Dev's grip was weak and sweaty, nothing like Marcus's confident squeeze. But his eyes were sharp, hungry in the same way Lena's were. "Don't make me regret this," he said, echoing Marcus's words. "Everyone regrets everything eventually," Lena said. "Let's just make sure we regret it for the right reasons." The first month was hell. They worked out of Lena's apartment because office space was a luxury they couldn't afford. Dev set up shop on the floor with his laptop and a tangle of cables that looked like electronic spaghetti. Lena claimed the one folding table she'd bought at a thrift store for $8. They worked 16-hour days, fueled by instant ramen and the cheapest coffee that could still technically be called coffee. The platform started to take shape slowly, painfully, like trying to build a house with toothpicks. Every feature they added revealed 3 more problems they hadn't anticipated. Every solution created 2 new complications. The regulatory requirements alone made Lena want to scream into a pillow for several hours straight. "We need a lawyer," Dev said one night around 2 a.m., his eyes bloodshot from staring at compliance documents. "A real one, not someone we found on Craigslist. We can't afford a real lawyer. We can't afford not to have one. If we screw up the regulatory stuff, the whole thing's dead before it starts. The SEC doesn't mess around with crowdfunding platforms. Lena knew he was right. She'd been avoiding it, hoping they could figure it out themselves. But the truth was, they were drowning in legal language neither of them fully understood. She sent out another round of emails, this time to lawyers. Most ignored her. 3 sent quotes that made her physically ill. One responded with a single sentence. Your budget is a joke. Then, on a Thursday afternoon when Lena was seriously considering whether despair counted as a business expense, she got a response from someone named Sarah Kim. I specialize in startup law and fintech regulation. Your budget is indeed a joke, but I admire the audacity. I'll do it for $3,000 flat fee to get you through regulatory approval plus 2% equity. After that, we renegotiate or part ways. Coffee tomorrow? They met at the same coffee shop where Lena had met Dev. Sarah showed up in a suit that probably cost more than Lena's entire wardrobe, carrying a briefcase that looked like it meant business. She was in her early 40s, Korean-American, with gray streaking through her black hair and the kind of presence that made people sit up straighter. Let me be clear, Sarah said before Lena could even start her pitch. I'm only here because Adrian Cole asked me to meet with you. Lena felt her stomach drop. Adrian called me last week, said you were worth my time, didn't explain why. Adrian doesn't explain much. Sarah opened her briefcase, pulled out a legal pad. So explain it to me instead. Why should I attach my professional reputation to someone whose last business ended up as a cautionary tale in entrepreneurship classes? Because this time I know what I'm doing wrong before I do it, Lena said. Because I'm not going to pretend I have answers I don't have. Because I'll listen to people who know more than me instead of thinking I'm smarter than everyone in the room. That's what you should have done last time. I know. I was arrogant. I thought passion and hard work could overcome ignorance. I was wrong. Sarah made a note on her pad. What makes you think you won't fail again? I probably will, Lena said, but at least this time I'll fail for different reasons. Sarah looked up, and for the first time, something almost like a smile crossed her face. That's the most honest thing anyone said to me in months. Everyone always promises they won't fail, like they can control the universe through sheer force of will. I can barely control my grocery budget. Good. Self-awareness is underrated. Sarah closed her briefcase. I'll take your ridiculous offer, $3,000, 2% equity, and I'm in until you're through regulatory approval. But I have conditions. Okay. You listen to every piece of legal advice I give you. You don't cut corners. You don't try to be clever with compliance. You don't make promises to investors you can't keep. And if I tell you something's too risky, you trust my judgment even if you don't like it. Done. Just like that? Just like that, Lena said. I'm done pretending I know better than people who actually know better. Sarah studied her for a moment, then held out her hand. They shook, and Sarah's grip was firm, professional, the handshake of someone who'd fought enough battles to know which ones were worth fighting. Adrian said you were different, Sarah said. I'm starting to see what he meant. What did he tell you? That you were someone who'd been broken and put yourself back together with cheaper parts. His exact words. Sarah picked up her coffee. He said people like that are either dangerous or valuable, and he was betting on valuable. Lena didn't know what to say to that. Have you talked to him? Sarah asked. Since the diner? No. Why not? Because I don't have anything to tell him yet, Lena said. He said to pay him back when I'm the boss. I'm not the boss of anything yet. Stubborn, Sarah said. That'll either save you or destroy you. Probably both. This time Sarah actually smiled. I like you, Lena Hart. Against my better judgment, I like you. With Dev building the platform and Sarah handling the legal framework, things started moving faster. Not smoothly. Nothing about the process was smooth. But at least they were moving in a direction that looked vaguely like forward. They hit their first major roadblock in week 7. The platform was built, tested, and mostly functional. Sarah had navigated them through the regulatory maze with only 3 minor panic attacks and 1 complete rebuild of their investor protection protocols. They were ready to launch their pilot program with 5 small businesses. The problem was finding 5 businesses willing to trust them. Lena had reached out to 43 small businesses over 2 weeks. She'd sent emails, made cold calls, showed up at shops and restaurants with printed pitch decks. Most people were polite but uninterested. Some were openly skeptical, A few were actively hostile. You want me to put my business on some untested platform run by someone who already failed once? One restaurant owner had said, loud enough for his whole staff to hear. Do I look stupid to you? Lena had left that meeting and cried in her car for 20 minutes before driving home. We need businesses desperate enough to take a risk on us, Dev said one night, surrounded by empty ramen cups and the glow of his laptop screen, but not so desperate that they're guaranteed to fail and make us look bad. That's a narrow window, Lena said. Yeah, well, narrow windows are kind of our specialty at this point. Lena stared at her laptop, at the spreadsheet of businesses she'd contacted, at the growing list of rejections. She was running out of options and time. Marcus's 3-month deadline was 5 weeks away. That's when she remembered the diner. She hadn't been back since that Tuesday morning, hadn't even driven past it. Some part of her was afraid to return, afraid it would feel different, afraid the memory would shrink into something smaller and less significant. But the diner was a small business, and Adrian owned it, which meant maybe, possibly, he'd be willing to let them use it as a test case. The thought of asking him for another favor made her skin crawl. She didn't want to be someone who took and never gave back. Didn't want Adrian to think she was using his kindness as a ladder. But she also didn't want to fail. Not again. Not when she was this close. Lena drove to the diner on a Wednesday afternoon, her hands sweating on the steering wheel of the beat-up Honda she'd bought for $900. The car made concerning noises whenever she went over 30 miles per hour, but it was hers, and it ran, and that was enough. The diner looked exactly the same. Same faded blue paint, same cracked parking lot, same neon sign with the burned-out letter. For a moment, Lena just sat in the car, staring at the building where everything had changed. Then she got out and walked inside. Donna was behind the counter, looking just as tired as she had 2 months ago. She glanced up when the bell over the door chimed, and recognition flickered across her face. Well, look who's back, Donna said. You clean up nice. Lena looked down at herself. Jeans that were only 6 months old instead of falling apart. A sweater that didn't have stains, hair that had been washed with actual shampoo instead of hand soap in a gas station bathroom. It wasn't much, but it was different. Thanks, Lena said. Is Adrian here? Not today. Tuesdays mostly, sometimes Thursdays. Donna poured coffee into a white mug without being asked and slid it across the counter. You can wait if you want, or I can give you his email. I don't want to bother him. Honey, if Adrian didn't want to be bothered, he wouldn't have bought you breakfast and told you to pay him back when you're running the world. Donna pulled out a pen, scribbled something on a napkin. Here, that's his direct email, not the business one, the one he actually reads. Lena took the napkin like it was made of gold. Thank you. Don't mention it. You want anything to eat? You still look too skinny. I'm okay. That's not what I asked. Despite everything, Lena smiled. Eggs and bacon, over easy. Now you're talking. While Donna cooked, Lena sat at the same stool she'd sat on that first morning. The counter was still scarred and worn. The coffee was still terrible, but somehow it tasted better than any fancy drink she'd ever had. When the food came, Lena ate slowly, savoring each bite, remembering what it had felt like to be so hungry she could barely think straight. That version of herself felt both impossibly far away and uncomfortably close. She paid for the meal with a $20 bill, left a $10 tip, walked back to her car with Adrian's email address folded carefully in her pocket. That night, Lena must have started and deleted 15 different emails to Adrian. Each one felt wrong, too casual, too formal, too desperate, too proud. How did you ask a favor from someone who'd already given you more than you deserved? Finally, at midnight, she gave up trying to make it perfect and just wrote the truth. Adrian, I don't know if you remember me. We met at the Bluebird Diner about 2 months ago. You bought me breakfast and told me to pay you back when I'm the boss. I'm not the boss yet, but I'm working on it. I'm building a crowdfunding platform for small businesses. We're ready to launch a pilot program, but we need 5 businesses willing to test it. I'm writing to ask if you'd consider letting the diner be one of them. Not because I expect favors, I'll pay the standard fees like any other business, but because you believed in me when no one else did, and I want to show you it wasn't a mistake. If the answer is no, I understand completely. Either way, thank you for what you did. I think about it every day. Lena Hart. She hit send before she could overthink it anymore, then closed her laptop and tried to sleep. Adrian responded at 6 in the morning. Lena, of course I remember you. I don't make a habit of buying breakfast for strangers and then forgetting about them. The diner's yours for the pilot. No fees. I want to see what you've built, but I have a condition. I want to meet your team. Dinner next Tuesday at my house. Bring whoever's working on this with you. If I'm putting my business on your platform, I want to know who's behind it. Send me your phone number. We'll coordinate details. Asilena read the email 3 times, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. Adrian remembered her. He was saying yes. And he wanted to meet her team, which meant he was taking this seriously, which meant this was real, which meant she couldn't mess it up. No pressure. She forwarded the email to Dev and Sarah with a subject line that just said, "We have our first business." Dev responded in 30 seconds. Holy shit. Sarah took longer, responding an hour later with typical lawyer precision. Good. But Tuesday dinner at his house feels less like business and more like he's vetting you personally. Dress professionally, but not like you're trying too hard. And brief me on everything you know about him before we go. The problem was, Lena didn't know anything about Adrian Cole beyond the basics. Billionaire. Single father. Owned half the commercial real estate in the county. Bought breakfast for homeless women and said cryptic things that changed their lives. She spent the next few days researching him online, which turned out to be harder than expected. Adrian kept a low profile for someone with that much money. No social media, few interviews. His Wikipedia page was bare bones and clearly out of date. The most recent news article she could find was from 3 years ago about him donating to a children's hospital. This guy's like a ghost, Dev said, scrolling through search results. Rich people usually love attention. This dude actively avoids it. Maybe that's why he's different, Lena said. Tuesday arrived faster than she wanted it to. Lena changed outfits 4 times before settling on black pants and a gray blazer that Sarah had lent her. Dev showed up in the same hoodie he always wore, and when Lena tried to make him change, he just shrugged. I am who I am, he said. If Adrian can't handle that, better to find out now. Sarah arrived in her usual suit, looking like she could negotiate a hostage situation before lunch and still have time for a manicure. They drove to Adrian's house in Lena's $900 Honda, which made concerning noises the entire way. When they pulled up to the address he'd given them, Lena was certain they had the wrong place. The house wasn't a mansion. It was a regular 2-story home in a regular neighborhood with a bike in the driveway and toys scattered across the front lawn. There was a basketball hoop over the garage and a garden that looked like someone actually gardened in it, not like it had been professionally landscaped. "This is it?" Dev asked. Lena checked the address again. "This is it. Billionaires live here?" "Apparently this one does." They walked up to the front door, and before Lena could knock, it swung open. Adrian stood there in jeans and a sweater, looking nothing like the composed figure from the diner and everything like a regular dad who'd just finished helping with homework. His hair was slightly messy. He was barefoot. "Lena," he said, and his smile was genuine. "You made it. Come in." They followed him inside. The house smelled like garlic and tomatoes, like someone was actually cooking real food instead of ordering from somewhere expensive. The living room was cluttered with books and kids' drawings stuck to the walls with tape. A coffee table held a half-finished puzzle and several coffee mugs. It was the least billionaire-like billionaire house Lena had ever seen. A girl around 8 years old appeared at the top of the stairs, staring down at them with open curiosity. "Emma, come say hello," Adrian called. The girl came down slowly, studying them like they were specimens under a microscope. She had Adrian's dark hair and the same sharp eyes. "This is my daughter," Adrian said. "Emma, this is Lena. Dev and Sarah. They're the ones I told you about." "The broke lady who's not broke anymore?" Emma asked, looking directly at Lena. "Emma," Adrian said, but he was trying not to laugh. "It's okay," Lena said. "Yeah, that's me. The broke lady who's trying really hard not to be broke anymore." Emma nodded seriously. "Dad says you're building something important." "I'm trying to." "Are you going to mess it up?" "Probably at some point," Lena said, "but I'm going to try not to." Emma considered this, then smiled. "Okay, I like you." Dinner was spaghetti and meatballs that Adrian had made himself, served at a kitchen table that had clearly seen better days. They ate on mismatched plates while Emma asked Dev approximately 700 questions about coding, most of which he actually seemed happy to answer. It was the strangest business meeting Lena had ever been part of. After dinner, after Emma had gone upstairs to finish her homework, Adrian finally brought up the platform. "Show me what you've built," he said. They spent 2 hours walking him through everything: the platform architecture, the vetting process, the investor protections, the regulatory compliance Sarah had navigated them through. Adrian asked questions that were sharp and specific, the kind that meant he actually understood what they were doing. When they finished, he sat back in his chair and was quiet for a long moment. "This is good," he said finally. "Really good. Better than I expected." "You expected it to be bad?" Dev asked. "I expected it to be ambitious and flawed. It's ambitious and surprisingly solid." Adrian looked at Lena. "You did this in 2 months?" "2 months, $20,000, and a lot of instant ramen," Lena said. "Marcus's money? You know about that too?" "Marcus and I talk. He tells me you're terrifying when you're motivated." "I prefer focused. That's what terrifying people always say." Adrian smiled. "The diner's in. I'll sign whatever paperwork Sarah needs, but I want weekly updates on how it's going. Real ones, not the sanitized version you'd give other clients." "Deal," Lena said. "And Lena?" Adrian's expression turned serious. "Don't lose yourself in this. I've seen what happens to people who sacrifice everything for success. It's not worth it." "Speaking from experience?" Sarah asked quietly. Adrian's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Always." They left around 10, piling back into Lena's terrible car with its concerning noises. Nobody spoke until they were halfway back to the city. Then Dev said, "That was the weirdest thing I've ever experienced." "Agreed," Sarah said. "He's not what I expected," Lena said. "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Someone more billionaire-y, private chefs and marble countertops and weird art that costs more than my life." "Some people get rich and forget where they came from," Sarah said. "Adrian's not one of them. That's rare." "You know him?" "We've crossed paths professionally. He's got a reputation for seeing value in things other people overlook. Businesses, people, opportunities. If he believes in what you're building, that means something." Lena stared out the window at the passing streetlights, thinking about Adrian's house, his daughter, the spaghetti dinner served on mismatched plates. Thinking about how someone with everything had chosen to live like he still remembered what it was like to have nothing. "He's testing us," she said suddenly. "What?" Dev asked. "The dinner, the casual setting. He's seeing if we're real or if we're just playing at being real. He wanted to know if we'd be uncomfortable in his regular life, or if we'd adapt." Sarah smiled. "You're learning. Is that a good thing?" "It means you're thinking like a founder instead of like someone desperate for approval. That's growth." When they got back to Lena's apartment, they stayed up until 3 in the morning planning the pilot launch. They had 1 business confirmed, needed 4 more. They had 3 weeks left on Marcus's timeline. They had $5,000 in the bank and a platform that was held together with code and prayers. It should have felt impossible. Instead, it felt like the beginning of something that might actually work. Lena fell asleep that night on her floor mattress, still in her borrowed blazer, with her laptop open beside her and the smell of Adrian's spaghetti sauce still stuck in her hair. She dreamed of diners and breakfasts she didn't have to pay for, of words that changed everything, of strangers who saw possibilities instead of failures. When she woke up at dawn, the first thing she did was open her notes and add to her list, "Things I will never do again." 1. Pretend I know what I'm doing when I don't. 2. Make promises I can't keep. 3. Ignore warning signs because I want something to work for. Let failure make me small. 5. Forget that someone believed in me when no one else did. 6. Stop fighting before the fight is actually over. She stared at that last line for a long time. Then she got up, made terrible instant coffee, and got back to work. The fight wasn't over. It was barely even started. But for the first time in longer than she could remember, Lena Hart was ready for whatever came next. Finding the other 4 businesses took 11 days of rejection that felt like getting punched in the face repeatedly while someone asked if you'd had enough yet. Lena had not had enough. She worked through a list of 73 small businesses, calling, emailing, showing up in person with printed materials that Dev said made her look like she was selling insurance. Most owners listened politely before finding creative ways to say no. A bakery owner in the South District told her it sounded interesting but risky. A bookstore manager said she'd think about it in a tone that meant never. A mechanic shop owner didn't even let her finish the pitch before saying he didn't trust anything that sounded too good to be true. "Nothing about this is too good to be true," Lena had said, frustration cracking through her professional voice. "It's hard and complicated and probably going to give me an ulcer." The mechanic had actually laughed at that. "At least you're honest, still no." By day 8, Lena was ready to start drinking heavily, or take up meditation, or possibly both. Dev had stopped asking how the recruitment was going after she'd thrown a stapler at the wall hard enough to leave a dent. Sarah kept sending encouraging emails that felt less encouraging and more like a lawyer's way of saying, "I told you this would be difficult." Marcus called on day 9. "You have 2 weeks left," he said without preamble. "Where are we?" "We have one business confirmed, working on the others." "Working on them isn't the same as having them." "I'm aware of that, Marcus." "Are you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're running out of time and options." Again, Lena closed her eyes, counted to 5. "What do you want me to say? That this is harder than I thought? That I'm terrified I'm going to fail? That every single day I wake up wondering if you and Adrian and Sarah are going to realize you made a mistake investing in someone who already proved she could crash and burn?" Silence on the other end. Then Marcus said quieter, "That's exactly what I wanted you to say. Because if you weren't scared, you wouldn't be paying attention." "I'm scared all the time. It's exhausting." "Good. Channel it. Scared people fight harder." He paused. "I'm not calling to pressure you, Lena. I'm calling because I know what it's like to be 2 weeks from a deadline with everything on the line. You want advice?" "Desperately." "Stop trying to convince people who don't want to be convinced. Find the ones who are already looking for what you're offering. They're out there. You're just looking in the wrong places." After Marcus hung up, Lena sat staring at her phone for a long time. Then she opened her laptop and started looking at the problem differently. She'd been targeting established businesses, the ones that looked stable and respectable, the ones that would make her platform look legitimate. But those businesses didn't need her. They had banks, investors, options. The businesses that needed her were the ones nobody else wanted to touch. Lena pulled up her research and started filtering for different criteria. Businesses less than 2 years old. Businesses in struggling neighborhoods. Businesses run by people with the kind of backgrounds that made banks nervous. 3 hours later, she had a new list of 37 businesses. She started calling. The first yes came from a woman named Patricia, who ran a catering business out of her apartment kitchen. She was 62, formerly incarcerated, and trying to build something legitimate with a criminal record that made traditional funding impossible. "You're telling me regular people can invest in my business?" Patricia asked, skepticism thick in her voice. "People I don't know?" "Yes. Small amounts. $50, $100, whatever they're comfortable with, in exchange for equity or profit sharing, depending on how you structure it. And you vet the investors? Make sure they're not just trying to steal my recipes or sabotage me?" "We vet everyone, businesses and investors both." Patricia was quiet for a moment. "I've been turned down by 14 banks in the last year. You know what that does to a person? Makes you feel like the world's decided you don't deserve a chance." "I know exactly what that feels like," Lena said. "Yeah? You got a record too?" "No, but I crashed a business so badly that people still bring it up as an example of what not to do, so I get the whole world's decided you're done thing." Patricia laughed, sharp and bitter. "All right, I'm in. When do we start?" The second yes came from 2 brothers, James and Marcus Thompson, who were trying to open a barber shop in a neighborhood where 3 other barber shops had failed in the last 5 years. They were young, ambitious, and completely broke. "Our credit's garbage," James said when Lena met them at the empty shop they'd leased. "We got turned down for a business loan twice. My boy Marcus here had to borrow money from his girlfriend's mom just to make first month's rent." "That's not something I'd normally advertise," Marcus muttered. "Man, we got nothing to hide. We're broke and we need help." James looked at Lena. "This platform thing of yours, it's real? Not some scam?" Lena pulled out her laptop, showed them the platform, walked them through exactly how it worked. Showed them Adrian's diner as an example. Explained the vetting process, the legal protections, the mentorship component they were building in. The brothers exchanged a look. "Our mom used to say beggars can't be choosers," Marcus said, "but we ain't beggars. We're businessmen who are currently broke. There's a difference." "Yeah, there is," Lena said. "So what do you say?" We say let's do this before we change our minds and realize how crazy it sounds, James said. The third yes came from a coffee shop called The Grind, run by a woman named Sophie who'd moved to the city from Portland with big dreams and a rapidly dwindling bank account. Her shop was in a good location, but she couldn't afford the marketing to get people through the door. I'm 3 months from closing, Sophie said, no emotion in her voice. Just fact. I put everything I had into this place. Sold my car, maxed out my credit cards, borrowed from my parents. If this doesn't work, I'm done. No pressure then, Lena said. Sophie almost smiled. You get it. Most people don't. They think owning a business is glamorous. It's not. It's terrifying and lonely, and you're always one bad month away from losing everything. Which is exactly why we're building this platform. So people like us aren't alone in it. People like us, Sophie repeated. You mean people who are probably going to fail but are too stubborn to quit? That's exactly who I mean, Sophie signed on that afternoon. The fourth yes was the hardest to get and came from the last place Lena expected. She'd been walking past a closed-down storefront on her way to meet Dev when she noticed someone inside, painting the walls. The space had been empty for months, one of those retail graves that never seemed to find new life. Lena knocked on the glass door. The person inside was a man in his late 20s, covered in paint splatters, wearing a respirator mask. He pulled it off when he saw her, came to unlock the door. We're not open yet, he said, still renovating. What is this going to be? Bookstore. Used books mostly, some new, coffee bar in the back, event space upstairs. He gestured at the empty room like he could already see it finished. If I can ever afford to finish it. You looking for funding? The man laughed. I'm looking for a miracle. Funding would require banks believing in me, and banks stopped doing that around the time I dropped out of business school to pursue this insanity. Lena handed him her card. I might have something better than a miracle. You got 20 minutes? His name was Daniel Chen, and he'd sunk his entire inheritance from his grandmother into buying this space and the initial inventory. He had passion, a solid business plan, and absolutely no money left for marketing, hiring staff, or finishing the renovations. I can do most of the work myself, Daniel said, showing Lena the detailed renovation plans he'd drawn up. But I need about $15,000 for materials, permits, and enough inventory to actually stock the shelves. Banks won't touch me without collateral I don't have. What if instead of one bank, you had 100 people each investing $100? Daniel stared at her. That's the same 15,000, but spread across 100 people who believe in what you're building instead of one institution that sees you as a risk number on a spreadsheet. Nobody's going to invest in a bookstore. Bookstores are dying. Chains are dying. Independent bookstores with personality and community focus are actually growing. You researched this, right? I researched everything. Spent 2 years planning before I bought this place. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, leaving a streak of paint. My parents think I'm insane. My friends think I'm having a quarter-life crisis. Maybe they're all right. Or maybe you're the only one who sees what this could be, Lena said. That's not insanity. That's vision. Vision doesn't pay the bills. No, but investors do. Daniel was the hardest sell because he was the smartest. He asked detailed questions about the platform's security, investor protections, equity structures, and long-term sustainability. He wanted to see their regulatory approval, their user agreements, their dispute resolution process. Lena answered everything, and when she didn't know something, she called Sarah right there and had her explain it. After 3 hours, Daniel finally said, Okay, I'm in. But if this crashes and burns, I'm blaming you. Fair enough, Lena said. Get in line behind everyone else who wants to blame me for things. 5 businesses. 2 weeks before Marcus's deadline. A platform that was ready to launch but still felt like it might fall apart at any second. Lena sent the confirmation email to Marcus at 11 p.m. on a Friday night. His response came back in 4 minutes. About damn time. Now comes the hard part. The hard part, it turned out, was everything that happened next. They launched the pilot on a Monday morning. David stayed up all night doing final testing, making sure the payment systems wouldn't explode, checking and rechecking the security protocols. Sarah had filed the last of the regulatory paperwork on Friday afternoon and immediately started drinking wine like it was her job. Lena had thrown up twice from stress and eaten approximately 1 meal in the last 48 hours. You look like death, Dev said when she showed up at the office space they'd finally rented, a tiny room above a dry cleaner that smelled like chemicals and desperation. Thanks. You look like you haven't slept in a week. That's because I haven't slept in a week. They were supposed to do a proper launch announcement, social media posts, press releases. Instead, Lena just sent emails to the small investor list they'd been building, about 300 people who'd signed up for early access after seeing their basic website. We're live, the email said. 5 businesses ready for funding. Come see what we're building. In the first hour, nothing happened. Lena refreshed the dashboard approximately 60 times, watching the investor count stay at 0. Maybe people need time to think about it, Dev said, but he didn't sound convinced. In the second hour, they got their first investor. Someone named Michael Rodriguez put $50 toward Patricia's catering business. Lena actually cheered. By the end of day 1, they had 37 investors and $14,000 committed across the 5 businesses. That's not enough, Dev said, staring at the numbers. It's a start, Lena said. Patricia needs 20,000. The Thompson brothers need 30. We're not even halfway there. It's day 1, Dev. You know what happens if these businesses don't hit their funding goals? They get nothing. The money goes back to the investors. We look like failures. Again, Lena knew. She'd designed that particular feature herself, insisted on it despite Dev's objections. All or nothing funding meant businesses either got what they needed or got nothing at all. It was risky, but it was also honest. We have 30 days, she said. People need time to discover this, to trust it, to tell their friends. And if they don't? Then we fail, and we figure out what went wrong, and we try again. Dev looked at her like she'd lost her mind. You're weirdly calm about this. I'm not calm. I'm terrified. But I spent 4 months being homeless and another 2 months building this from nothing. If it fails, at least I'll fail knowing I did everything I could. The truth was messier than that. The truth was Lena went home that night and lay awake until 4 in the morning, staring at her ceiling, running scenarios in her head. What if nobody else invested? What if the businesses failed even after getting funded? What if this whole thing was just another spectacular disaster with her name attached? What if Adrian had been wrong about her? By day 3, they had 60 investors and $23,000 committed. Still not enough, but moving in the right direction. By day 7, they had 112 investors and $41,000. Patricia's catering business was fully funded. The Thompson brothers were at 70%. Sophie's coffee shop was at 45%. Daniel's bookstore was struggling at 30%. Adrian's diner sat at 120% of its goal, which was both encouraging and problematic because it meant people trusted Adrian's name more than they trusted the other businesses. We need to redistribute the attention, Sarah said during their weekly crisis meeting. The diner doesn't need the exposure. The others do. You want me to call Adrian and tell him to stop being popular? Lena asked. I want you to leverage his popularity to help the others. Can we feature the underfunded businesses more prominently? Send targeted emails to people who invested in the diner? They could. They did. It helped. Some. By day 14, the Thompson brothers hit their funding goal. Sophie's coffee shop reached 70%. Daniel's bookstore was still stuck at 42%. People don't believe in bookstores, Dev said, stating the obvious. Then we need to make them believe, Lena said. She spent the next 2 days creating content about Daniel's bookstore. Photos of the space, videos of Daniel talking about his vision, testimonials from the neighborhood about why they needed a community gathering spot. She posted it everywhere she could think of: social media, local forums, neighborhood groups. She called in favors from people she barely knew, asked friends of friends to share the campaign. She stayed up until 3 a.m., engaging with every single comment, answering questions, addressing concerns. By day 20, Daniel's bookstore hit 63% funding. By day 25, it was at 89%. On day 29, with less than 24 hours left in the funding window, Daniel's bookstore sat at 94% of its goal, $900 short. Lena called him at 7 in the morning. We're close, she said. So close. Can you push it on your end? Tell everyone you know? One last push? I've told everyone already, Daniel said. He sounded exhausted. My parents even invested, and they think this whole thing is a mistake. I don't know who else to ask. There has to be someone. Lena, if it doesn't hit the goal, it's okay.
At least we tried. It's not okay. You need this money. Your business needs this money.
94% is pretty good, though, right? That's further than I thought we'd get. No, Lena said, surprised by the anger in her voice. 94% is failure. 94% means you worked this hard and still came up short. That's not okay. Daniel was quiet for a moment. You really care about this? Of course I care. This is my platform. If your business fails, it reflects on me. That's not why you care.
He was right. She cared because Daniel reminded her of herself. Someone betting everything on a dream that everyone else thought was stupid. Someone who'd rather fail trying than quit before the fight was over. Just keep pushing, Lena said. We've got 24 hours. She spent that last day watching the numbers climb with agonizing slowness. $900 became $800, then $700, then $650.
4 hours before the deadline, they were still $400 short. Lena pulled up her bank account. She had $1,800 in savings, money she'd been setting aside for next month's rent and living expenses, money she couldn't afford to invest. She invested $400 in Daniel's bookstore. Dev saw the transaction come through on the dashboard and looked at her. You just broke your own rules, he said. Platform owners aren't supposed to invest in listed businesses. Conflict of interest. Find me later, Lena said. Sarah's going to kill you. Sarah can get in line behind everyone else. At 11:58 p.m., Daniel's bookstore hit 100% of its funding goal. All 5 pilot businesses were fully funded. Lena burst into tears right there at her desk, ugly crying that she couldn't control or hide. Dev pretended not to notice, which was the kindest thing he could have done. The next morning, Sarah called. I saw the transaction, she said. That was stupid. I know. You violated your own platform policies. I know. You could get in regulatory trouble if anyone finds out. I know, Sarah sighed. It was also the right thing to do. But don't do it again. I won't have to. We proved it works. You proved you can successfully crowdfund 5 businesses with huge personal sacrifice and probably several minor violations of best practices. That's not the same as proving the model scales. Why can't you just let me have this win for like 5 minutes? Because in 5 minutes, you need to start thinking about the next 30 businesses, and the legal framework for expansion, and the sustainability model, and the fact that Marcus is going to want to see real returns on his investment, not just successful pilot programs. Lena closed her eyes. Can I just enjoy the fact that we didn't fail? No, because not failing isn't the same as succeeding. It's just the bare minimum required to keep going. Sarah was right, which made it worse. They had proven the pilot worked. Now they had to prove they could do it again, bigger, better, without Lena bankrupting herself to make up the difference. But that problem was for tomorrow. Today, Lena let herself feel the win. She called each of the 5 business owners personally to congratulate them. Patricia cried. The Thompson brothers whooped so loud she had to hold the phone away from her ear. Sophie said thank you 17 times in 3 minutes. Daniel just said, I can't believe this is real. It's real, Lena told him. You did this. We did this, Daniel corrected. I never would have gotten here without your platform. When Lena hung up, she sat in her tiny office that smelled like dry cleaning chemicals and let herself breathe for what felt like the first time in 30 days. They'd done it. They'd actually done it. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I heard the pilot was successful. Well done. AC. Lena stared at the message. She'd been sending Adrian weekly updates like he'd requested, but he'd never responded to any of them. She'd started to wonder if he was even reading them. She typed back, thank you for everything. I mean it. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Appeared again. You did the work. I just bought breakfast. That breakfast changed my life. No, you changed your life. I just reminded you that you could. Lena read the message 3 times, feeling something complicated and warm settle in her chest. Then Adrian sent one more text. Come by the diner Tuesday morning. There's someone I want you to meet. She showed up at 6:30 a.m. earlier than she needed to because sleep was still not something her brain allowed when she was stressed or excited or basically experiencing any emotion. The diner looked exactly the same as always. Donna was behind the counter pouring coffee for the early morning crowd. She saw Lena and smiled. Look who's back. You want your usual? I have a usual now?
Honey, you've been here 3 times. That's enough for me. Eggs and bacon, over easy.
Lena sat at her old stool, the one at the far end of the counter. The one she'd sat at that first morning when she'd been so hungry she could barely think. Adrian slid onto the stool next to her 5 minutes later, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "You're early," he said. "So are you." "I'm always early. It's a problem." He handed her one of the coffees. "Congratulations on the pilot. I read all your updates every week." "You never responded."
I didn't want to interfere. This was your thing to build. I was just watching. Pretty involved watching, considering you sent Marcus and Sarah my way. Adrian smiled. Maybe a little involved. Can you blame me? I like seeing things work out. Is that what you do? Go around finding broken people and fixing them? I don't fix anyone. People fix themselves. I just give them permission to try.
Donna brought over Lena's breakfast, set it down with the same no-nonsense kindness she always had. Lena stared at the plate. 2 eggs, geese, bacon, hash browns, toast. The same meal that had saved her life 6 months ago. "I can pay for this now," Lena said. "For real." "I know you can," Adrian said. "But you don't have to. Not yet. You said to pay you when I'm the boss." "Are you?" Lena thought about her tiny office, her barely profitable platform, the fact that she'd had to invest her own rent money to make the pilot work. "Not yet." "Then save your money. You're going to need it." A woman walked into the diner then, someone Lena didn't recognize. She was in her 50s, wearing an expensive suit, carrying a leather briefcase that screamed serious business. Adrian waved her over. "Lena Hart, this is Victoria Chen. She runs an investment firm that focuses on social impact ventures. Victoria, this is Lena, the one I told you about." Victoria held out her hand. Her grip was firm, assessing. "Adrian's been talking about your platform for 3 months. I told him I'd believe it when I saw results." "And?" Lena asked. "And I'm impressed. 5 businesses fully funded in 30 days with 0 marketing budget and a platform held together with, what did Adrian say? Pure spite and determination." "That sounds about right," Lena said. Victoria sat down, pulled out a tablet. "I want to invest. Proper investment, not the crowdfunding type. I'm talking about scaling this platform to handle 500 businesses in the next year, building out the infrastructure, hiring a real team, creating partnerships with business development organizations." Lena's brain stuttered. That's a huge jump." "Yes, which is why you need serious capital and serious guidance. I'm offering both." "How much capital?" $500,000 for 20% equity. The number hit Lena like a physical thing. $500,000. More money than she'd ever seen. Enough to actually build what she'd been imagining. "Why?" Lena asked. "Why what?" "Why invest in me? I failed spectacularly once already. My track record is garbage. You could invest in someone with actual experience and success." Victoria smiled. "Adrian warned me you'd be suspicious. He said you've learned to question good things because you've been burned too many times." He's not wrong. Here's the truth, Lena. I invest in people who understand failure intimately because those are the people who build sustainable businesses. Success makes you confident. Failure makes you careful. And careful people with something to prove are my favorite kind of bet. "That's a hell of a pitch," Lena said. "It's not a pitch. It's an offer. Take the weekend to think about it. Talk to your team. Talk to your lawyer. But understand, this is a one-time offer. I don't chase investments. If you're not ready, say so now and I'll walk away with no hard feelings." Lena looked at Adrian. He was watching her with that same expression from their first meeting, like he could see a future she couldn't quite picture yet. "What do you think?" she asked him. "I think it's your decision," Adrian said. "But I also think you didn't build this platform to stay small. You built it to help as many people as possible. That requires scale, and scale requires capital you don't have." He was right. She knew he was right, but the thought of giving up 20% of her company to someone she'd met 5 minutes ago made her want to throw up. "Can I have 3 days instead of a weekend?" Lena asked Victoria. "Sure, but not a day longer." Victoria left her card and walked out, leaving Lena sitting at the counter with her coffee going cold and her breakfast untouched. "You barely know me," Lena said to Adrian. "Why do you keep doing this?" "Doing what?" "Putting opportunities in front of me. Vouching for me. Believing I can do this when I barely believe it myself. Adrian was quiet for a moment, staring into his coffee cup like it held answers. I told you someone did this for me once. Gave me a chance when I didn't deserve it. I was 24, broke, angry at the world, convinced I was going to amount to nothing, and someone I barely knew invested in a business idea I had that was half-baked at best. What happened? I failed, spectacularly, lost their money and mine, spent 2 years paying off the debt. Adrian smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. But that person didn't give up on me. They said, now that you know what failure looks like, try again with better information. So I did. And the second business worked, and the third, and eventually I became someone who could pay it forward. This is you paying it forward, Lena said. This is me recognizing someone who reminds me of who I used to be, someone hungry enough to rebuild from nothing and smart enough to learn from their mistakes. Adrian finally looked at her. You're going to take Victoria's offer. You know you are. You're just scared. Of course I'm scared. What if I fail again? Then you fail, and you figure out what went wrong, and you try again. That's how this works. That's easy for you to say. You're a billionaire. I'm a billionaire who started exactly where you are, broke, desperate, and terrified of messing up again. Adrian stood up, dropped a 20 on the counter, even though he owned the place. Take the deal, Lena. Build something big. Help more people than you ever could by staying small and safe. He left before she could argue. Lena sat there for another hour, eating her breakfast slowly, thinking about Victoria's offer, about Adrian's words, about how far she'd come from that Tuesday morning 6 months ago when she'd walked in here with $3 and nothing left to lose. She pulled out her phone and called Sarah. We need to talk, Lena said. Someone just offered me $500,000, and I need you to tell me if I'm insane for considering it. Sarah laughed. Let me guess. Victoria Chen? How did you... Adrian mentioned she might reach out. I've already started preliminary due diligence on her firm. She's legitimate, Lena. More than legitimate. She's one of the best in the social impact investment space. So I should take it. I didn't say that. I said she's legitimate. Whether you should take it depends on what you want this company to become. Do you want to stay small and maintain control? Or do you want to scale and accept that scaling means sharing power? I want to help as many people as possible. Then you already know the answer. Lena hung up and called Marcus next. $500,000 for 20%, she said. Your thoughts? That's a fair valuation considering your traction. Take it. Just like that? Just like that. You've proven the model works. Now you need capital to scale. Victoria's money is as good as anyone's, and her connections are better than most. Stop overthinking this. What if I mess it up? You will mess parts of it up. Everyone does. But you'll also get parts right. And the parts you get right will matter more than the parts you get wrong. Stop looking for permission to succeed, Lena. You already earned it. She called Dev last. $500,000, she said. 20% equity. Dev whistled. That's real money. Yeah. You're going to say yes, right? I think so. Good, because I'm exhausted and we need to hire actual people to help build this thing. I can't keep coding 18 hours a day on instant ramen and Spite. The Spite isn't sustainable? Spite is great for the first 6 months. After that, you need health insurance and weekends. Lena laughed despite herself. Okay, I'll take the deal. Good. Now go celebrate or something. You're allowed to be happy occasionally. But happiness felt complicated. Every win came with new pressure, new expectations, new ways to fail. She'd spent so long rebuilding that she'd forgotten how to enjoy anything without immediately worrying about what could go wrong. She drove home, climbed the 4 flights to her apartment, and collapsed on her floor mattress. She should call Victoria and accept the offer. She should start planning the expansion. She should do approximately 73 things that were urgent and important. Instead, she lay there staring at her water-stained ceiling and let herself feel everything at once. The fear, the excitement, the exhaustion, the strange, fragile hope that maybe, possibly, she might actually pull this off. Her phone buzzed. Another text from Adrian. Whatever you decide, I'm proud of you. That probably doesn't mean much coming from someone who barely knows you. But I wanted you to know anyway. Lena stared at the message until her vision blurred. It meant everything. She typed back, It means more than you know. Thank you. For the breakfast, for the introductions, for seeing something in me I couldn't see in myself. I didn't see something that wasn't already there. I just helped you remember it existed." Lena closed her eyes, and for the first time in months, let herself cry not from stress or fear, but from something that felt dangerously close to gratitude. She'd been broken. She'd rebuilt herself with cheaper parts and spite, and the memory of a stranger's certainty. And somehow, impossibly, it was working. 3 days later, Lena signed Victoria's term sheet in Sarah's office, with Dev and Marcus as witnesses. $500,000, 20% equity, a partnership that would either launch her platform into something meaningful or become another spectacular failure with her name attached. She signed her name and felt the weight of it settle into her bones. The fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. But for the first time since that Tuesday morning at the diner, Lena Hart believed she might actually win. The money hit their account on a Wednesday, and Lena spent the entire day refreshing her banking app like it might disappear if she looked away too long. $500,000. The number looked fake, like someone had photoshopped an extra zero onto her balance as a joke. "Stop staring at it," Dev said from across their new office. An actual office with windows that opened and a bathroom that didn't require walking down 3 flights of stairs. "The money's real. It's not going anywhere." "How do you know? Maybe banks make mistakes. Maybe Victoria's going to call tomorrow and say there was an error." "That's not how wire transfers work." "You don't know that for sure." Dev threw a stress ball at her head. She caught it without looking, which was impressive considering she'd been staring at her phone screen. They hired 3 people in the first month. A designer named Kira, who made their platform look like something built by professionals instead of desperate people drinking bad coffee at 3 a.m. A customer service specialist named Tom, who had the patience of someone who'd worked retail for 15 years and had seen every possible flavor of human nonsense. And a business development associate named Rachel, who had connections in the small business community and actually knew how to write marketing copy that didn't sound like a ransom note. "We have a team," Lena said at their first official team meeting, held around a conference table they'd bought secondhand from a law firm going out of business. "This is surreal." "Wait until you have to do payroll," Sarah said from where she sat in the corner, reviewing their employment contracts. "Then it gets really surreal." With Victoria's investment came Victoria herself, who insisted on weekly board meetings that felt less like meetings and more like getting interrogated by someone who'd read every business book ever written and wasn't impressed by excuses. "Your customer acquisition cost is too high," Victoria said during their third meeting, pointing at a spreadsheet that made Lena's eyes hurt. "You're spending $43 to acquire each investor, but your average investment is only $75. That's not sustainable." "We're still figuring out the marketing," Lena said. "Figure it out faster. At this rate, you'll burn through the investment in 18 months and have nothing to show for it except a really expensive education in what not to do." Marcus, who joined their board after Victoria came on, just laughed. "She's not wrong." "Thanks for the support," Lena muttered. "I'm not here to support you. I'm here to make sure you don't waste my money. There's a difference." They scaled faster than Lena had thought possible. By month 2, they had 15 businesses on the platform. By month 4, they had 47. By month 6, they'd facilitated over $2 million in funding across 83 businesses. It should have felt like success. Instead, it felt like standing on a tightrope while someone kept adding weight to both ends. The problem started small, like most disasters did. A bakery in the East District had raised $30,000 through the platform, then disappeared. Just closed up shop, took the money, and vanished. The investors were furious. The local news picked up the story. Suddenly, Lena's platform was under investigation for facilitating fraud, according to a headline that made her want to throw her laptop out a window. "This is exactly what I was afraid of," Sarah said, pacing Lena's office like a caged animal. "One bad actor and the whole platform's credibility is shot. We need to respond, fast." "We vetted that business," Lena said, but her voice sounded hollow even to herself. "We did background checks, reviewed their business plan, everything. Clearly we missed something." They worked 20-hour days for a week straight, coordinating with law enforcement, tracking down the bakery owner, trying to recover the investors' money. Sarah filed paperwork. Rachel handled the PR nightmare. Dev implemented new security measures. Lena called every single investor personally to apologize. Most of them were understanding, some were not. "You promised this was safe," one investor said, a retired teacher named Dorothy, who'd put in $500. You said you vetted these businesses. We did. We do. But people lie, Dorothy, and sometimes they're good at it. That's not good enough. I trusted you. I know, and I'm sorry. We're doing everything we can to recover your money.
It's not about the money. It's about the fact that you made me believe in something that turned out to be a scam.
The call ended badly. Most of them did. They eventually tracked down the bakery owner, a man named Robert Mills who'd used the money to pay off gambling debts and was now facing criminal charges. The investors got about 60% of their money back after legal fees and recovery costs. It wasn't enough, but it was better than nothing. The damage to the platform's reputation was harder to measure and impossible to fully repair.
Our new business applications dropped 40% after the news broke, Rachel said during a crisis meeting. People are scared. They don't trust us anymore.
So we rebuild the trust, Lena said.
How?
Good question. Lena didn't have a good answer. Victoria did.
You go on camera. You own the mistake. You explain exactly what went wrong and what you're doing to prevent it from happening again.
No spin, no corporate speak, just brutal honesty.
That sounds like a terrible idea, Lena said. It's the only idea that works. People forgive mistakes if you own them. They don't forgive cover-ups or excuses. Lena did a video interview with a local news station, sitting in a chair that squeaked every time she moved, and talking to a reporter who clearly thought she was either a fraud or an idiot or both. How did this happen? The reporter asked.
We missed red flags in our vetting process, Lena said. We trusted documents that shouldn't have been trusted. We assumed people were telling the truth when we should have verified harder. So you admit your platform isn't safe? No platform is perfectly safe. Anytime you invest money, there's risk. What I'm saying is we didn't manage that risk well enough, and people got hurt because of it. That's on me.
What are you doing to fix it?
We've implemented stricter vetting procedures. We're requiring more documentation. We're doing in-person visits for every business over a certain funding threshold. And we're creating an insurance fund to partially protect investors if something like this happens again.
Partially?
We can't guarantee full protection. That would be lying, and I'm done lying to make people feel better. Investing has risks. We're trying to minimize those risks, but we can't eliminate them completely. The interview felt like a disaster. Lena was sure she'd made everything worse. Then the messages started coming in. Investors thanking her for being honest. Business owners saying they respected the transparency. Even Dorothy, the retired teacher who'd yelled at her, sent an email. I still don't like what happened, but I appreciate you not treating me like an idiot. Most companies would have. I'm keeping my account open.
Honesty, Dev said, watching the messages roll in. Who knew that actually worked?
Victoria knew, Lena said. Victoria knows everything. It's annoying. They recovered slowly. Applications started coming back. Investors began trusting again. The insurance fund they created, funded by taking a slightly higher platform fee, became a selling point instead of an admission of failure. By month 9, they were back on track. By month 12, they'd surpassed their original growth projections. And then Lena's past came back to haunt her in the form of a lawsuit. One of her creditors from the first failed business had decided that now that Lena had money again, they wanted theirs. Never mind that the debt had been discharged in bankruptcy. Never mind that Lena had spent years rebuilding. They filed a lawsuit claiming she'd committed fraud, misrepresented her business prospects, and deliberately misled investors. It was all bullshit. Sarah said so immediately after reading the filing. This won't go anywhere, Sarah said. The bankruptcy discharge is clear. They have no case. But they filed it anyway. Because they're hoping you'll settle just to make it go away. Don't. Fight it. You'll win. How much will fighting cost? In legal fees? About $30,000. Lena felt sick. $30,000 to fight a baseless lawsuit filed by people who wanted to punish her for having the audacity to succeed after failing. Do it, she said. I'm not settling. I'm done letting people make me feel like I don't deserve a second chance. The lawsuit dragged on for 3 months, sucking up time and money and energy that Lena needed for running the actual business. She had to give depositions, provide documentation, relive every mistake from her first business in excruciating detail. The other side's lawyer was a man named Peterson, who looked like he'd been practicing law since before Lena was born and enjoyed making people squirm. You claimed your first business would be profitable within 6 months, Peterson said during her deposition. That was a lie, wasn't it? It was a projection that turned out to be wrong, Lena said. There's a difference. Is there? You took people's money based on that projection.
I took people's money based on a business plan I believed in. I was wrong. The business failed. I filed bankruptcy and discharged the debts legally. And now you're running another business, taking more people's money based on more projections that might be wrong. Sarah jumped in. That's argumentative and not a question. I'll rephrase, Peterson said, smiling like a shark. What makes you think you won't fail again, Ms. Hart? I don't think that, Lena said. I might fail again. Most businesses do. But this time I know what failure looks like. And I've built in protections to minimize the damage when things go wrong. Because things will go wrong. They always do. Peterson blinked. He'd clearly expected her to get defensive, to make promises she couldn't keep. So you admit this business might fail. Any business might fail. That's not news. What matters is whether we're honest about the risks and whether we do everything we can to manage them. The deposition went on for 4 hours. Lena left feeling wrung out and angry and tired of having to defend the fact that she'd dared to try again after failing once. You did great, Sarah said in the parking lot. He was trying to rattle you and you didn't rattle. I feel rattled. That's different from looking rattled. Trust me, he's worried now. He thought you'd be an easy target. The case was dismissed 6 weeks later. The judge called it a transparent attempt to circumvent bankruptcy protections and harass a discharged debtor. Peterson's firm had to pay Lena's legal fees. It should have felt like a victory. Instead, Lena just felt exhausted. She was standing in her office at 7 p.m. on a Friday, staring at the city lights through her window and wondering when success had started feeling like drowning, when her phone rang. Adrian's name appeared on the screen. They'd barely spoken in the past year. Lena had sent him updates occasionally, but he'd stayed distant, letting her build without interference. She'd assumed he'd moved on to other projects, other people to save with breakfast and cryptic advice. Hello? She answered. I heard about the lawsuit, Adrian said. Congratulations on the dismissal. News travels fast. Sarah told me. She thought you might need to hear that someone was proud of you. I don't need... Lena stopped. That was a lie. Okay, maybe I do need that. How are you holding up? Honestly, I'm tired. Really tired. I thought success would feel different. Different how? Less like constantly running from disaster. Less like I'm one mistake away from losing everything again. Adrian was quiet for a moment. Can I tell you something I learned the hard way? Please? Success doesn't make the fear go away. It just changes what you're afraid of. When you're broke, you're afraid of staying broke. When you're successful, you're afraid of losing it. The fear never leaves. You just get better at functioning with it. That's depressing. It's honest, and honesty is more useful than optimism. He paused. You've built something real, Lena, something that matters. But if you burn yourself out before you can enjoy it, what's the point? I don't know how to not burn myself out. This is all I have. That's the problem right there. You need something else, something that isn't work, something that reminds you why you're doing this in the first place. Like what? I have no idea. That's your job to figure out, but figure it out before you collapse. After they hung up, Lena sat in her office for another hour, thinking about Adrian's words. She couldn't remember the last time she'd done something just because she wanted to, not because it was necessary for the business. She went home and slept for 12 hours straight. When she woke up, she did something she hadn't done in over a year. She went for a walk. No phone, no laptop, no checking email every 3 minutes. Just walking through the city, watching people live their lives, remembering what it felt like to exist without a constant sense of urgency. It felt strange, uncomfortable, but also necessary. The platform kept growing. They passed 100 businesses, then 200, then 300. They facilitated $10 million in funding, then $20 million, then $35 million. The team grew to 12 people, then 20, then 35. Lena moved from doing everything herself to managing people who did the things she used to do. It was both a relief and terrifying, trusting other people with parts of her company. Victoria pushed for expansion into new markets. Marcus pushed for profitability. Sarah pushed for better legal protections. Dev pushed for more automation so he could stop manually fixing things at 2 a.m. Everyone pushed, and Lena was in the middle trying to balance it all.
2 years after signing Victoria's term sheet, Lena's platform was featured in a major business publication. They called it the most promising fintech startup in the social impact space. They interviewed Lena, asked about her journey, her vision, her plans for the future. They also asked about her first business, the failure that had preceded all of this. "Do you regret it?" the interviewer asked. Lena thought about that question longer than she should have. "I regret that people lost money. I regret that I hurt people who trusted me. But do I regret trying? No. Because without that failure, I wouldn't have built this. I wouldn't have known what mistakes to avoid." Failure is an expensive education, but it's an education. The article came out and went viral. Suddenly, everyone wanted to talk to Lena about failure and redemption and second chances. She did podcasts, keynote speeches, panel discussions. She became the poster child for "you can rebuild after disaster." It was flattering and exhausting and sometimes felt like fraud because she still didn't feel like she'd succeeded. She felt like she was still figuring it out, still terrified of messing up, still waiting for someone to realize she didn't actually know what she was doing. "Imposter syndrome," Rachel said when Lena mentioned it. "Everyone successful has it. Even Victoria? Especially Victoria. She just hides it better." 3 years after that Tuesday morning at the diner, Lena's platform had helped fund over 800 small businesses. They'd facilitated $73 million in investments. They'd created an ecosystem where regular people could invest in the businesses they believed in, and struggling entrepreneurs could find funding when banks said no. It was everything Lena had imagined, and more. And she was so tired she could barely stand it. She was in her office on a Wednesday afternoon reviewing expansion plans for the West Coast when her assistant knocked on the door. "There's someone here to see you," Michelle said. "He doesn't have an appointment, but he said you'd want to see him." "Who is it?" Michelle smiled. "He said his name is Adrian Cole, and you owe him breakfast." Lena's heart did something complicated in her chest. She walked out to the reception area, and there he was. Adrian, looking exactly the same as he had 3 years ago, standing in her office lobby like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You're taller than I remember," Adrian said. Lena laughed despite herself. "I'm wearing heels now. That's the only difference. And you have an office with actual furniture, and employees who look terrified of you." "They're not terrified. Michelle looked terrified when I mentioned breakfast. That's because she knows I skip meals when I'm stressed, and she's been trying to get me to eat lunch for 3 hours. Lena crossed her arms. "What are you doing here? Collecting a debt?" "I don't owe you anything yet. I'm not the boss." Adrian looked around the office, at the team working at their desks, at the conference room where a meeting was happening, at the logo on the wall that Dev had designed and Lena had cried over because it meant they were real. "Lena," Adrian said quietly, "you're the boss. You've been the boss for a while now. Stop waiting for permission to admit it." Lena wanted to argue, wanted to point out all the ways she was still figuring things out, still making mistakes, still terrified she'd mess it all up. But looking at Adrian's face, at the certainty in his expression, she realized he was right. She'd done it. She'd built something real. She'd become exactly what he'd seen in her that morning when she'd been too hungry and broken to see it herself. "Okay," she said. "I'm the boss." "Good. So about that breakfast. I owe you way more than breakfast." "The deal was breakfast. I'm a man of simple tastes." "How about dinner instead?" Lena asked. "Tonight, my treat. Somewhere nicer than a diner." "The diner's pretty nice," Adrian said, but he was smiling. "The diner's perfect. But I want to take you somewhere that shows you I'm not the same person who walked in there 3 years ago with $3 and nothing left to lose." "I know you're not the same person. That's why I'm here." Adrian checked his watch. "Dinner sounds good, but it has to be before 8. I've got to pick up Emma from her friend's house." "How is Emma?" 11 now. Terrifying. Asks too many questions and sees through every lie I try to tell. She asked about you last week, actually." "What did you tell her?" "That you were doing exactly what I thought you'd do, building something that mattered." They had dinner at a restaurant Lena had only read about in magazines, the kind of place where the menu didn't list prices and the waiters moved like dancers. Adrian ordered wine that probably cost more than Lena's first car, and they talked about everything except business. He told her about Emma's school play, about the house renovation that was taking twice as long as expected, about the struggle of being a single parent while running multiple companies. She told him about learning to delegate, about the lawsuit, about the constant fear that it would all collapse if she looked away for too long. "You need to take a vacation," Adrian said. "I can't. Too much to do." That's what everyone says. Then they burn out or have a heart attack or wake up one day and realize they built an empire but forgot to have a life. Speaking from experience again?
Always.
Adrian set down his wine glass. Emma's mom left when she was 2, walked out and never came back. I spent 5 years angry about it, working myself half to death, convincing myself that success was the same as healing. It wasn't. Success just made the hole bigger because I had more things, but I was still just as empty. What changed? Emma did. She was 7, and I missed her school concert because I was in a meeting I thought was too important to reschedule. She didn't cry or yell. She just looked at me and said, "It's okay, Dad. I know work is more important." That sentence destroyed me. Lena felt something twist in her chest. That's brutal. That's what woke me up. I realized I was becoming exactly what I hated. Someone who had everything except time for what actually mattered. Adrian looked at her directly. "Don't make the same mistake, Lena. You've built something incredible. Don't forget to build a life around it." They finished dinner around 9. Adrian insisted on splitting the check even though Lena had invited him. "This wasn't about paying back a debt," he said. "This was 2 friends having dinner. Friends split checks." "We're friends?" Lena asked, surprised by how much she wanted that to be true. "We've been friends since I bought you breakfast 3 years ago. You just didn't know it yet." They walked out into the cool evening air. The city was alive around them, people heading to bars and shows and wherever people went when they had lives outside of work. "Thank you," Lena said, "for everything. For the breakfast, for believing in me, for Victoria and Marcus and Sarah. For seeing something in me I couldn't see." "I didn't see something that wasn't there," Adrian said, repeating what he'd told her before. "I just reminded you it existed." "Still, thank you." Adrian pulled her into a hug, quick and surprising. When he stepped back, his expression was serious. "You did this, Lena. Not me, not Victoria or Marcus or anyone else. You took a plate of eggs and some words from a stranger and turned it into a company that's changed hundreds of lives. That's all you. I couldn't have done it alone. Nobody does anything alone. But you were the one who got up every morning and decided to try again. You were the one who kept going when quitting would have been easier. That's what I saw that morning at the diner. Not someone who needed saving, someone who was already saving herself and just needed someone to acknowledge it." Lena's eyes burned. She blamed it on the wine and the exhaustion and the emotional overload of the past 3 years catching up all at once. "I'm going to cry," she warned him. "That's allowed. I don't cry in front of people. I'm not people. I'm the guy who bought you breakfast. Different category." She laughed and cried at the same time, standing on a city sidewalk with a man who'd changed her life with eggs and certainty and the willingness to believe in a stranger. When she finally got herself together, Adrian was checking his phone. "I have to go get Emma," he said. "But Lena, take that vacation, or at least take a weekend. The company will survive without you for 48 hours. I promise." "How can you promise that?" "Because you've built something sustainable. That's the whole point. If it can't function without you, you haven't built a company. You've built a job that will eventually kill you." After Adrian left, Lena stood on the sidewalk for a long time, watching the city move around her, thinking about his words, thinking about how far she'd come and how tired she was and how scared she still felt despite everything. She pulled out her phone and called Dev. "I'm taking a week off," she said. "You're what?" "A week, starting Monday. You're in charge. Don't burn the place down." "Are you dying? Did the doctor tell you something?" "I'm fine. I'm just taking advice from someone who knows what he's talking about." "This is suspicious. You don't take time off." "I'm learning to." "Think you can handle things?" Dev was quiet for a moment. "Yeah, I can handle it. The real question is whether you can actually disconnect for a week without checking email every 5 minutes." "I'll try." Lena Hart. Trying to have work-life balance. The world really has changed. She hung up and started walking home. Her apartment was different now, a real place with real furniture and a kitchen she sometimes cooked in. She'd moved out of the studio above the dry cleaner 18 months ago, but sometimes she missed it. Missed the simplicity of having nothing, of knowing exactly what she was fighting for. Now she had more than she'd ever imagined, and somehow it felt both heavier and less substantial than she'd expected. But maybe that was normal. Maybe success was supposed to feel complicated. Maybe Adrian was right, and she needed to figure out how to enjoy what she'd built instead of just constantly fighting to keep it. She spent that week off the grid. No email, no Slack, no emergency calls. She went to museums she'd been meaning to visit, read books that had nothing to do with business, slept until 9 a.m. without feeling guilty about it. It was the hardest week she'd had in years. But when she came back to the office, she felt different, lighter, maybe, or at least less like she was drowning. "You look weird," Dev said when she walked in. "Gee, thanks." "No, I mean, you look rested. It's disturbing." "Get used to it. I'm going to try doing this regularly." "Who are you and what have you done with Lena?" She threw a stress ball at his head. He caught it and grinned. The company kept growing. They expanded to the West Coast, then to the Midwest, then nationally. They hired more people, opened more offices, facilitated more funding. And Lena learned to let go, to trust her team, to take weekends off occasionally, to build a life that was more than just work and fear and the constant need to prove she wasn't the failure everyone had once thought she was. 4 years after that Tuesday morning, Lena's company was valued at $80 million. Victoria's original investment had grown 15 times over. Marcus's had grown even more. Sarah had taken equity instead of fees and was now wealthier than she'd ever expected. They'd helped fund over 2,000 businesses. They'd created an industry standard for ethical crowdfunding. They'd changed lives. Not just the businesses they funded, but the investors who got to be part of something meaningful. And Lena Hart, the woman who'd once sat in a diner with $3 and nothing left to lose, was finally, undeniably, the boss. 5 years after that cold Tuesday morning, Lena woke up in a hotel room that cost more per night than her first apartment had cost per month. The ceiling was unmarked, pristine white, nothing like the water-stained disaster she'd stared at for months while building her company from nothing. She lay there for a moment, disoriented by comfort, before remembering why she was here. Today was the day she was going back to the diner. The acquisition offer had come through 3 weeks ago. A major financial services company wanted to buy her platform for $130 million. The lawyers were still working through details, but the deal was essentially done. Lena would walk away with enough money that she'd never have to worry about anything again. Her team would be taken care of. The businesses using the platform would continue to get funded. Everyone would win. So why did she feel like she was losing something? "Because you built this thing with your own hands," David said when she'd mentioned it. "And now you're selling it to people who'll probably screw it up within 2 years. The contract has protections. They have to maintain the mission for at least 5 years. Contracts are just words on paper. You know that." She did know that. But she also knew she was exhausted. 5 years of fighting, of building, of carrying the weight of other people's dreams on her shoulders. It had worn her down in ways she was only now starting to acknowledge. The acquisition meant she could finally stop, could finally rest, could finally figure out who Lena Hart was when she wasn't constantly trying to prove she deserved a second chance. She got dressed in a suit that Sarah had insisted she buy for important meetings, even though Lena still felt like a kid playing dress-up whenever she wore it. The fabric was soft, expensive, nothing like the Goodwill jacket she'd worn that first morning. She looked at herself in the hotel mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Her phone buzzed. A text from Adrian. "Still on for this morning?" She'd called him 2 weeks ago, told him about the acquisition, asked if he wanted to meet at the diner one last time before everything changed. He'd said yes immediately, like he'd been waiting for her to ask. Lena typed back, "On my way." The drive to the diner felt longer than it should have, even though the route was the same one she'd walked 5 years ago when she'd had nowhere else to go. The city looked different in daylight, prosperous and busy, people rushing to jobs and lives that made sense. She wondered how many of them had ever been as broke as she'd been, as desperate, as certain their story was already over. The diner appeared around a familiar bend in the road, and Lena's breath caught. It looked exactly the same. Same faded blue paint, same cracked parking lot, same neon sign with the burned-out letter. Like the last 5 years had happened everywhere except here. She pulled into the parking lot in a car that was newer but not ostentatious. She'd learned that from Adrian. Real wealth didn't need to announce itself. It just existed, quiet and certain. But today was different. Today she'd arranged for something Adrian didn't know about. The black limousine pulled in behind her car, and Lena watched in the rearview mirror as the driver got out and opened the back door. She stepped out of her own car, straightened her suit, and walked toward the diner. Inside, the smell hit her first: coffee and bacon and grease and memory. Donna was behind the counter, looking maybe a year older but otherwise unchanged. A few early morning customers sat scattered across the booths, regular working people with regular lives. And there, at the counter, sitting on the same stool he'd occupied 5 years ago, was Adrian. He looked up when she walked in, and his expression shifted through surprise to understanding to something that might have been pride. "You rented a limousine," he said. "I wanted to make an entrance. You could have just walked in. You've earned the right to walk anywhere you want." Lena slid onto the stool next to him, the same one she'd sat on that first morning. "I know, but some things deserve ceremony." Donna came over, coffee pot in hand, and just smiled. "Well, look at you. I heard about your company, all over the news. Made me cry a little, if I'm being honest." "Don't cry yet," Lena said. "I'm buying breakfast for everyone in here, whatever they want." "Everyone?" "Everyone." Donna's eyes went wide. "Honey, that's not necessary." "Neither was feeding me when I was broke, but you did it anyway." Lena pulled out a credit card that didn't have a limit. "Please, it would make me happy." Donna took the card, shook her head, but she was smiling. Adrian waited until Donna walked away before speaking. "You didn't have to do this." "I know, but I wanted to." Lena turned to face him fully. "I came here to pay back a debt. The breakfast you bought me 5 years ago. I figured one breakfast wasn't enough, so I'm buying breakfast for everyone here. Plus this." She pulled an envelope from her bag and set it on the counter between them. Adrian looked at it but didn't touch it. "What is this?" "Open it." He did, carefully, like he already knew what it was. Inside was a check. Not for the cost of breakfast. That would have been insulting. The check was for $50,000, made out to the Adrian Cole Foundation, a charity Lena had researched months ago. It provided scholarships for kids from low-income families, the kind of kids who needed someone to believe in them. "Lena, that's not the debt," she said quickly. That's a thank you. For Emma, for other kids like her, for making the world better in ways most people never see." Adrian stared at the check for a long moment. When he looked up, his eyes were bright. "You didn't have to do this. You keep saying that. But you're wrong. I did have to do this, because 5 years ago, you gave me something more valuable than money. You gave me certainty. You looked at me when I was at my absolute lowest, and you spoke to me like my future was already decided, like success was inevitable if I just showed up for it. I just bought you breakfast. You saved my life." The words hung in the air between them, honest and raw and true. Adrian was quiet for a moment, then he said, "You saved your own life. I just reminded you that you could." "I know, but I needed that reminder. I needed someone to see me as something other than a failure. You did that. So thank you." Donna brought over 2 plates without being asked. Eggs and bacon over easy, just like that first morning. She set them down and squeezed Lena's shoulder before walking away. They ate in comfortable silence for a while. Lena savored every bite, remembering what it had felt like to be so hungry that food was the only thing that mattered. That version of herself felt both impossibly distant and uncomfortably close. "I heard about the acquisition," Adrian said eventually. "Congratulations." "How did you hear about that? It's not public yet." "Victoria told me. She wanted my opinion on whether you should take it." "What did you tell her?" "That it's your decision, but that sometimes knowing when to let go is just as important as knowing when to hold on." Lena set down her fork. "I don't want to let go. That's the problem. I built this thing from nothing. It's mine. And now I'm selling it to people who will probably turn it into just another corporate profit machine. Will they? The contract has protections, but contracts can be renegotiated. Mission drift happens. I've seen it. So don't sell." "I'm so tired, Adrian. I'm 35 years old and I feel like I'm 60. I haven't slept properly in 5 years. I can't remember the last time I did something just because I wanted to, not because it was necessary for the business." Adrian nodded slowly. "I've been there. That's why I asked you here this morning. I wanted to tell you something I learned the hard way." "What's that?" "Money doesn't fix the hole inside you, it just makes the hole more comfortable." He picked up his coffee.
stared into it like it held answers. After Emma's mom left, I threw myself into work, built companies, made money, convinced myself that success would fill the emptiness. It didn't. I just ended up rich and lonely, with a daughter who barely knew me. But you fixed that. You and Emma are close now. We are. But it took me almost losing her to figure it out. She was 9, and I'd missed so many school events and bedtimes and regular Tuesday afternoons that she just stopped expecting me to show up. One night I came home late, and she was already asleep. I went to kiss her goodnight, and she didn't even wake up. Just kept sleeping, like my presence or absence made no difference. Adrian's voice cracked slightly. That destroyed me. Because I realized I'd become exactly what my own father had been. Someone who provided everything except the one thing that actually mattered. Time, attention, being present. Lena felt something twist in her chest. What did you do? I sold 2 of my companies, kept the ones I actually cared about and could run without sacrificing my life. Cut my work hours in half. Started showing up for Emma in ways that mattered. Tuesday morning diner trips, school concerts, regular dinners where we actually talked. And you don't regret it? Selling those companies? Not for a second. Because I got my daughter back. I got my life back. I stopped being someone who had everything and felt nothing. Adrian looked at her directly. You're at that same crossroads, Lena. You can keep building, keep fighting, keep proving you're not a failure. Or you can accept that you already proved it and start living like someone who has nothing left to prove. I don't know how to do that. Neither did I. But you figure it out. You take small steps. You say no to things that don't matter. You build a life instead of just a company. Donna came back over with the coffee pot. Everyone's asking who the fancy lady is buying breakfast. I told them you're someone who remembers where she came from. That's all I am, Lena said. Someone who got lucky. Luck had nothing to do with it, Donna said firmly. Luck is finding a $20 bill on the sidewalk. What you did was work. Hard work. Don't diminish it. After Donna walked away, Adrian smiled. She's right, you know. You worked for this, every piece of it. I had help. You, Marcus, Victoria, Sarah, Dev. I couldn't have done it alone. Nobody does anything alone. But you were the one who got up every morning and decided to keep trying. That's what made the difference. Lena finished her breakfast, pushed the plate away. I'm going to take the acquisition offer, but I'm going to negotiate for more control over the transition. Make sure the mission stays intact longer than 5 years, and then I'm going to do what you said. Figure out who I am when I'm not just fighting to survive. Good. That's exactly what you should do. But I'm scared. Of what? Of becoming irrelevant, of not mattering, of waking up one day and realizing that the company was the only thing that made me important, and without it, I'm just nobody. Adrian reached over and put his hand on hers. The gesture was fatherly, kind, the touch of someone who understood exactly what she was feeling. Lena, you were never nobody. You were someone worth saving that Tuesday morning before you'd built anything. You're someone worth knowing now. The company didn't make you matter. You made the company matter because you built it with integrity and heart, and the determination to help people who remind you of yourself. Lena's eyes burned. She blinked hard, trying to keep herself together. I don't know what comes next, she admitted. That's okay. Not knowing is fine. It's even healthy. You've spent 5 years knowing exactly what you needed to do every single day. Maybe it's time to not know for a while. See what happens when you're not constantly fighting. They sat in silence for a moment, surrounded by the sounds of the diner, the clatter of dishes, the murmur of conversation, the hiss of the griddle, the same sounds that had been there 5 years ago when Lena's life had changed. I want to do something, Lena said suddenly, with some of the acquisition money. Something that matters. Like what? I don't know yet. Maybe a fund for people rebuilding after failure. Maybe scholarships. Maybe just buying breakfast for homeless people at diners across the city. She laughed a little. That sounds stupid. That sounds perfect, Adrian said. That sounds like exactly what you should do. You think so? I know so. Because you understand what it's like to need that kindness, to be at the end of everything and have someone show up with something as simple as eggs and certainty. Adrian squeezed her hand before letting go. Pay it forward, Lena. That's the whole point. Someone helped you. Now you help someone else. That's how the world gets better, one breakfast at a time. The door to the diner opened and Emma walked in, now 13 and looking so much like her father it was startling. She saw them at the counter and grinned. "Dad, you didn't tell me Lena was going to be here," Emma said, sliding onto the stool on Adrian's other side. "I wanted it to be a surprise." Emma looked at Lena with open curiosity. "Did you really build a company from nothing?" "More or less." "Dad says you were homeless and now you're a millionaire. That's like a movie." "It's not as glamorous as movies make it seem," Lena said. "Mostly it was terrifying and exhausting and lonely. But you did it anyway." "I did it anyway." Emma nodded seriously. "I want to do something like that, build something, make a difference. Dad keeps trying to get me to think about college, but I want to start a business." Adrian groaned. "Please don't encourage her. She's already too much like me." "Being like you isn't a bad thing," Lena said. "Your dad's one of the best people I know." "He bought you breakfast," Emma said, like she'd heard the story 100 times, "and told you to pay him back when you're the boss." "That's exactly what happened." "That's so cool. Like he could see the future or something." "Not the future," Adrian said. "Just potential. Anyone could have seen it if they'd been paying attention." "Not anyone," Lena said quietly. "Most people looked at me and saw someone who'd already failed. You looked at me and saw someone who was going to succeed. That's rare." Donna brought Emma a hot chocolate without being asked, and they sat together at the counter, 3 people whose lives had intersected at exactly the right moment in exactly the right way. After a while, Emma excused herself to meet friends, leaving Lena and Adrian alone again. "She's amazing," Lena said. "She is, and terrifying. She wants to change the world, and she's convinced she can do it before she turns 18. Wonder where she gets that from." Adrian smiled. "She asked me last week why I still come to this diner every Tuesday. She said we have money now. We could go anywhere." "What did you tell her?" "That some places matter more than their menu. That this diner is where I remember who I was before money, before success, before any of it. It keeps me honest." "Is that why you bought it? To keep yourself honest?" "I bought it because the previous owner was going to sell it to a developer who'd tear it down and put up condos. I couldn't let that happen. Too many memories here." Adrian looked around the diner with obvious affection. "Plus, Donna threatened to haunt me if I let it close. She's worked here for 32 years. Where else would she go?" "You're a good man, Adrian Cole." "I'm a man who tries. That's different from being good." Lena stood up, smoothed her suit. "I should go. I have a meeting with the lawyers in 2 hours to finalize the acquisition details." "Before you do," Adrian said, standing as well, "I want to give you something." He pulled a small envelope from his jacket pocket and handed it to her. "What is this?" Lena asked. "Open it when you get home, not before." "Adrian, please, trust me on this." Lena tucked the envelope into her bag, hugged Adrian tight. He hugged back, and for a moment she felt like she had a father, a mentor, a friend who understood exactly what she'd been through because he'd been there himself. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything, for seeing me, for believing in me, for giving me a second chance when I couldn't give it to myself." "You gave yourself the second chance," Adrian said. "I just bought breakfast. Don't forget that." Lena pulled back, wiped her eyes. "I won't, I promise." She walked out of the diner and got into her car, sat there for a moment looking at the building that had changed everything. Then she opened the envelope Adrian had given her. Inside was a single piece of paper, handwritten in Adrian's careful script. "Lena, 5 years ago, I told you to pay me back when you're the boss. You did that this morning, though not in the way either of us expected. The breakfast for everyone, the donation to the foundation, that was more than I ever asked for. But I'm going to ask for something else now, something more important. I want you to find someone like you were 5 years ago. Someone broken and desperate and convinced their story is over. I want you to buy them breakfast. Not because they deserve it or earned it, but just because they need it. And I want you to tell them the same thing I told you. Pay me back when you're the boss. Not because you're paying off a debt to me, but because that's how we save the world. One person at a time, one act of kindness at a time. One moment of certainty when someone has none left for themselves. You're not done, Lena. You're just getting started. This acquisition is the end of one chapter, but the beginning of something else. Something better. Something that will matter in ways you can't even imagine yet. Find that person. Buy them breakfast. Change their life the way yours was changed. That's all I ask." With pride and affection, Adrian and Lena read the letter 3 times,
tears streaming down her face, not bothering to hide them or wipe them away. He was right. Of course he was right. She'd spent 5 years proving she wasn't a failure. Now she needed to spend the next 5 helping other people do the same thing. The acquisition closed 6 weeks later. Lena walked away with $87 million after taxes and equity distribution. Her team got bonuses that made several of them cry. The mission protections she'd negotiated were stronger than the original contract, giving her confidence that the platform wouldn't immediately become something she didn't recognize. She could have retired, bought a house somewhere warm, spent the rest of her life doing nothing. Instead, she started a foundation. The Lena Hart Second Chance Fund, dedicated to helping people rebuild after failure. They provided small grants, business mentorship, and something more valuable than either, belief that failure wasn't final. The first grant went to a woman named Jasmine who'd lost her restaurant to bankruptcy and was living in her car. Lena met her at a shelter, bought her breakfast at a nearby diner, and said words that echoed across 5 years. "Pay me back when you're the boss." Jasmine stared at her like she was insane. "What?" "You heard me. Rebuild. Start again. And when you're successful, when you're running your own thing, then you can pay me back." "That's the craziest thing I've ever heard." "I know," Lena said, smiling. "Someone said it to me once. Changed my life. Now I'm saying it to you." The foundation grew quickly. Within a year, they'd helped 43 people restart their lives. Within 2 years, they'd helped over 200. Some failed again. That was inevitable. But some succeeded in ways that made Lena's heart hurt with pride. Patricia, the caterer who'd been one of the first businesses on Lena's platform, now ran a successful catering company that employed 12 people and specialized in hiring people with criminal records. The Thompson brothers had expanded to 3 barbershops. Sophie's coffee shop had become a small chain. Daniel's bookstore was a neighborhood institution. All of them remembered where they'd started. All of them helped others the way they'd been helped. That was the point, Lena realized. Success wasn't just about building wealth or companies or influence. It was about creating a ripple effect of kindness, of second chances, of belief in people when they'd run out of belief in themselves. 3 years after the acquisition, Lena was speaking at a conference about failure and resilience. The crowd was massive, hundreds of entrepreneurs and business owners who'd come to hear her story. She told them about the diner, about Adrian, about being so hungry and broken that a plate of eggs felt like salvation, about the words that had changed everything. "Someone believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself," she said to the silent crowd. "And that belief gave me permission to try again, to fail better, to rebuild with intention instead of desperation." She paused, looked out at all those faces. "If you take one thing from this talk, let it be this. You are not your failures. You are not your worst moments. You are not the things that broke you. You are what you do next. You are how you rebuild. You are the choice to get up one more time even when staying down seems easier." The applause was thunderous, but Lena barely heard it. Because in the front row, sitting next to Emma, who was now 16 and already talking about starting her own nonprofit, was Adrian. He was smiling that quiet smile of his, the one that said he'd known all along how this would turn out. After the talk, they went to dinner, Lena, Adrian, Emma, and Dev, who'd come along because he never passed up free food. They ate at a regular restaurant, nothing fancy, and talked about everything except business. Emma was applying to colleges but wanted to defer to spend a year working with Lena's foundation. Adrian was proud and terrified in equal measure. Dev had started dating someone and was convinced he was going to mess it up. Lena had been invited to give a TED Talk and was already planning to wear her comfortable shoes instead of the heels Sarah kept insisting on. They were just people living regular lives, except for the fact that 5 years ago, their lives had intersected in exactly the right way at exactly the right time. On the drive home, Lena's phone buzzed with an email. Another grant application, this one from a man who'd lost everything in a business collapse and was trying to rebuild. His story sounded familiar, the desperation, the shame, the certainty that he'd never recover. Lena read it twice, then forwarded it to her foundation team with a note. "Approve this. Schedule a meeting. I want to buy him breakfast." That's what she did now. Bought breakfast for broken people. Looked at them and saw not what they'd lost but what they could build. Gave them certainty when they had none left for themselves. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't always successful, but it mattered. That was enough. 5 years after walking into a diner with $3 and nothing left to lose, Lena Hart understood something fundamental about success and failure and the strange journey between the two. Kindness wasn't just about being nice. It was about seeing potential in people who'd forgotten they had any. It was about giving someone permission to try again, to fail better, to rebuild with wisdom earned through pain. Adrian had given her that gift. And now she was giving it to others, one breakfast at a time, one certainty at a time, one second chance at a time. Because the world didn't change through grand gestures or massive movements. It changed through small acts of belief, through strangers who looked at broken people and saw someone worth saving. It changed through breakfast and certainty, and the willingness to invest in someone's future when all evidence suggested that future was already over. That Tuesday morning, 5 years ago, Adrian Cole had bought Lena Hart more than eggs and bacon. He'd bought her time, space to breathe, permission to try again. And she'd taken that gift and turned it into a company, a foundation, a life that mattered. Not because she was special or chosen or destined for success, but because someone had believed in her when she couldn't believe in herself. And that had made all the difference. Years later, when people asked Lena what the secret to her success was, she never talked about business strategy or market opportunities or the perfect pitch deck. She talked about a Tuesday morning, a plate of eggs, a stranger's certainty. She talked about how the smallest acts of kindness can change someone's entire trajectory if they happen at exactly the right moment. She talked about Adrian Cole, who'd seen something in a hungry, desperate woman that she couldn't see in herself. And she talked about paying it forward, about finding other broken people and giving them the same gift she'd been given. Because that's what mattered, not the money or the success or the headlines, but the moment when someone at the end of everything heard words that made them believe in beginnings. Pay me back when you're the boss. Not if, when. That certainty, that belief, that willingness to invest in someone's potential instead of their present. That's what changed lives. That's what changed Lena's life. And that's what she spent the rest of her life giving to others. One breakfast at a time, one certainty at a time, one second chance at a time. Because kindness wasn't just something you received. It was something you passed on, multiplied, transformed into a ripple that reached farther than you'd ever know. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, a stranger bought you breakfast and reminded you that your story wasn't over. It was just beginning.